Hello and welcome to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. I'm your host, Nina Adio, a social media marketing expert specific to the wedding industry. On this show, I discuss tips to help you DIY your social media, as well as getting the confidence and income to outsource it. Thank you for allowing this episode to come through on your Bluetooth, your car radio, wherever it may be you're listening from today. Now, let's take your wedding business to the next level. Welcome back, everybody, to the I Do Wedding Marketing Podcast. We have a really exciting episode for you today because I have got a wedding pro coming in, somebody who can really speak about the hands-on experience. And what we're going to be talking about is luxury weddings in specific. So before I introduce you to today's guest, I just kind of wanted to catch up. You know, we're at the tail end of engagement season. So it's been a really busy and exciting time for all of us. I've gotten to meet a lot of new people and do some new projects while working with some new clients, and one of which includes today's guest, Alexandra Denniston, who I met through an Instagram audit that I did for her a few weeks ago. And as I was looking at her profile and getting to know her, I realized that in addition to being a just really great high-end wedding planner, that she is a teacher. So I said, let's chat. Let's do a podcast episode. And whenever I start talking to her, oh my gosh, it's so much fun because we can just go on and on and on about weddings and resources. But let me tell you a bit about her and what we're going to be talking about today. So, as a Rhode Island based but destination inspired wedding and event planner, owner and lead planner Alexandra or Ali Denniston specializes in crafting luxury events that are tailored to each client's needs and desires. She has a keen eye for detail and a passion for bringing each couple's vision to life. The Eventlightenment team has a reputation for creating really just truly memorable luxury events. And so, from choosing the perfect venue and coordinated talented vendors to designing stunning decor and curating a seamless flow of events, every aspect of planning is handled to ensure that her clients' events are stress free and unforgettable. But what is really special about Ali of Eventlightenment, and you can go to her Instagram at Eventlightenment or at eventlightenment.com, I'll have that linked in the show notes, is that she really does cater to luxury clients. And I wanted her to speak about how wedding professionals can branch into that market, how to price if they're in that market, and how to even identify if that's a market they even want to be in. And she really covers it all. So I'm so excited for you to get to hear her expertise on that. So here we go. I'm going to go straight to the interview now, guys. Um,
I got
Okay,
it.
we made it. Hi, Allie.
Amazing. Hi, Nina. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I am so excited. I met Allie through doing an Instagram audit for her great brand, Eventlightenment. And as I was doing it, I was like, this girl is doing some nice stuff, some real high-end stuff. So that's how we got to know each other and got to start chatting about her brand and her goals. And how was that experience for you?
Oh, it was so great. I feel pretty confident in my Instagram presence and my practices, but I also feel like you don't know what you don't know. So
Mhm.
I was eager to just kind of get a, real professional's perspective on where am I at? What could I be doing better? And I feel like you gave me some really good tips, and I have actually put some of those tips into practice since we talked. And for example, those kind of advice tiles that you
Yeah, you
recommended,
had a
I've been
great one
doing over the
today.
last week, and I get some great engagement on those. So I'm so glad, and I know that the feed is not necessarily, it doesn't have to look pretty, but I'm super OCD. So like, I like it when it looks pretty. So I'm coming up with, a good pattern that I can go with to kind of keep it looking nice. And, like I said, I've seen some great engagement and some new follows and things like that, and people who are, sharing my stuff. So, I give it 2 thumbs up. I'd give it more if I had more than 2
Oh,
thumbs.
great. Yeah, Allie's profile was a great example, and you can check it out. We'll have everything linked down below. But she had a great profile. It wasn't negative feedback at all. It was all about leveraging what she
Right.
had. So don't go into it afraid that somebody's going to tell you everything sucks. It wasn't that at all. It
No.
was how can we next level this? So it was a lot of fun.
Absolutely. And there were some, like I said, there were really great tips, things that, I had thought about, but maybe just didn't get the impetus to like put into practice. So yeah, it was really very helpful for me. I definitely recommend it for others who are looking to either level up or don't know where they're at. I think it's a really good resource.
Thank you. Thank you. And speaking of level up, that's really what I wanted to talk with you about today for the audience. Because as I was getting to know you and your brand, and you coach other wedding planners and wedding pros too, I was realizing you really have a great understanding of the luxury market in the wedding world. And that is a market that not everybody knows how to get into. They don't all know if
Sure.
they want to be in it. And so I thought, well, this would
Yep.
be great for us to talk about. And we may be using the term planner a lot because Allie is a planner, but really, I think this can apply to any vendor.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, I totally agree. Totally agree.
Right. So let's just start, I guess, at the basics, which is how can
Yeah.
a wedding planner or vendor best determine if they belong in a luxury market?
Sure. So I think the first thing to really think about where you're at now is sort of what is the price point of the weddings that you're planning or that you're involved with? What's their like total spend in relation to the typical spend in your area, obviously, because it's going to vary depending on where, in the US you might be, or if you're, somewhere globally. But take a look at that first, and that'll kind of determine what is the luxury market in your area, because it could vary. I think the next thing to think about is, what do you want to be doing? Because when you bump up to that luxury market, it's a different beast. You're the focus, I think, amongst the clients are a little bit different. It might be a little bit less budget conscious, not meaning that there isn't a budget, but it might be a little less budget conscious and a little more detail focused. I know a lot of planners start out doing, day of coordination or month of coordination with a lot of like DIY brides doing a lot of that day of stuff. When you're bumping up into that luxury market, you're going to be a lot more focused on that full service planning. So all of the details from the very beginning until the very end, and the bitter end for some, So I would recommend deciding if that's something you want to do, because there are some planners who I've worked with who are like, I like the one and done. I just want to come in, the day of or the day before, help with the setup, and then get out of there. And then there are others that are a little more focused on, perhaps the full relationship and the way that things progress through the planning process. So I think that's where you start. Is that definitely something you want to commit to? Because I think if you're going to be in the luxury market, you need to be all in it. Definitely be fully focused. And then that, I think that's sort of what determines if you're meant to be there or not. Are you willing to make that commitment and sort of level up your involvement in the process? And if so, then I would say go for it.
Yeah. And I love how you said that it's not necessarily the answer for everybody. And I think that's
Yes.
what if you don't think that a luxury market is for you, I encourage you listen the whole way through, because this will not only help you determine it, but we get into a lot of other things that can apply to everybody, regarding pricing and things like that. But one thing
Right.
I wanted to ask you, knowing your background, which our podcast guests may not know this part yet, but you worked for a really reputable high-end brand, which was able to
I did.
introduce you to
Mhm.
what a luxury client is like, or a high-end client.
Exactly.
And is that something you would recommend to somebody maybe taking a part-time job or something like that?
Yes. Absolutely. I think getting as much experience in sort of the different levels, of the industry is really helpful, because it's not for everyone. So you might, get knee deep in it and be like, oh boy, like I don't want to get in, up to my shoulders for this, this isn't for me. So I do think that, finding a way to get some experience in that area is really helpful, whether that be a part-time job, an internship, if that makes sense for you. The other thing to consider, and I do this. I have folks that work with me for as my assistants for the day, because no one should ever be executing a wedding by themselves if they're in this industry. So I always have assistants with me. So maybe being someone's assistant for a season or for a month or whatever makes sense for you to kind of get your feet wet, could be really helpful just to kind of set the stage for what you're getting into.
I love that because I actually do that. I have a friend who's a
Yeah,
wedding planner, and I'll assist her because it helps keep me connected with the vendors,
right.
the vendor world. And she's such a great example of what you've been saying because, she was doing a lot of these high-end off-premise, we call them weddings out here,
Yeah.
kind of in the Hamptons. And then finally she was like, I miss zebra print. Like I miss doing my zebra
Yeah.
print, weddings
Right.
that weren't this market. And so
Right.
she had to go through the trial and error though to determine
Totally.
that.
And I feel like there's no right or wrong answer in terms of where you want to be, like
Mhm.
it's purely personal preference. Like hopefully people who are, embarking either on their wedding planning journey or on their wedding industry journey, whatever that kind of vendor, might be, like you do it because you love it. So, do push it that much further and do what you love within that industry as well. You don't want to force yourself to do all the nitty gritty when you really just like being in the action on the day of, you definitely have to assess that for yourself, I think.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned how in the beginning, it will be mostly maybe day of coordinating and then you
Hmm.
kind of evolve from there. At what stage in your business do you recommend a vendor or planner reassess their pricing, or how often should somebody be doing this?
Sure. I mean, for me, it's like a constant evaluation. You know, the market is changing so quickly. Inflation obviously is a factor. The connections that you make. So I think what a good, oh, at least how I kind of handle it is I have my starting price point and then I adjust it based on each client, because every client is going to have a vastly different need, or focus or preference. So, I would set sort of a threshold, per package or per service that you feel comfortable with as your kind of minimum. And then, have that in your head and then work from there as get the information from each inquiry, each client. I do think at a minimum, you should be considering revising annually, because then at that point, you can kind of look back on your year, and make a determination of, could I pay all my bills? Did I make the profit that I want to make? In the end, as much as the folks like myself in this industry love what we do, we're doing it to make a living. So, that's something that I actually learned the hard way was like, you need to pay yourself. You need to be, making a living that you're comfortable with off of this, if that's why you're doing this. So I would always have that sort of in the back of your mind as well as you're setting your pricing. For the first year that I was out on my own, I didn't pay myself. And I got to the end of the year, and one of my other planner friends were like, but did you pay yourself? And I'm like, well, no. And they're like, you have to pay yourself, like give yourself a salary. You have to figure that out. So I was really glad that I got that advice, and was able to, change how I was handling my finances
Mhm.
on the back end and begin to actually give myself a salary so that, all of my hard work was, showing in dollar signs.
Yeah, yeah. And I think a lot of us make that mistake. So hopefully, if somebody's in
Mhm.
their first year, you're listening.
Right,
And
right.
I think another great point about the custom nature of the pricing is because, especially with these high-end weddings, they're not
Hmm.
really buying a venue package, or they're not really
Right.
getting these packages. They're It's
Hmm.
kind of like the sky is the limit, and it's very
Exactly.
custom, and so you do a disservice to yourself, I think, by just trying to
Right.
fit them into a package, because they're not
Right.
going to. So that was
Right.
really great insight. Something else I learned about you is that you have a great relationships with other planners in your area, not just other planners, but they're in your
Yeah.
area, and you guys are on a really friendly level, and you share things to help each other. And so I'm wondering, how do you recommend others get on a friendly level with perceived competitors, where they can be open and maybe even collaborative with pricing? Because if I get one more
Absolutely.
person who asks me to go undercover for
I
pricing.
know. Right. I know. When I think back, like, when I worked for a venue, I did my fair share of, mystery shopping, of other venues and whatnot. And I really, like, I had a hard time with it because I'm like, why is this so secret?
Hmm.
Like, it should be public knowledge if you're looking to have clients, or to have people book your venue or have people book your services. Like, they're going to have to know how much it costs, so it's not like it really is this like top secret recipe that no one can tag in on, because in the end, your secret sauce is your personality, is how you do your job, how you communicate with your clients, all of your processes. I would say perhaps you keep those things more lock and key, but even so, no one's going to do it like you. Even if they have, the exact, step by step instructions of how you would handle a certain situation, no one's going to do it like you. So, as far as how you get onto that level with others, all I did was be very candid and just ask. I'm like,
I love it. I
listen,
love it.
I am who I am. You are who you are. I tried to explain like why I was asking. Like, I want to know, like, am I in the similar ballpark as other people? Like, I'm not asking because I'm going to change what I'm doing necessarily. I'm just curious to understand, what is the scope of, what you offer versus what your pricing is. And then I can kind of compare it to what I offer and what my pricing is. I think that it's market research, and I think everyone should, be engaging in that. Like I said, just because you know what their pricing is, isn't necessarily going to change anything about their business versus your business. Because a lot of the times, and my planner friends and I talk about this all the time, like, yes, they're buying your services, but they're also buying you, like, as a person.
Absolutely.
I
Absolutely.
like I have this really great friend, Casey, and she and I, we go back and forth all the time. And the people who book her because she's her. And the people who book me because I'm me. So, I don't necessarily see that as competition. I don't want to
Right.
work with someone that's not a good fit for me as a planner, as far as my personality goes. So I think that's a really important thing to keep in mind, and perhaps incorporate, if you are going to straight up ask someone, about their pricing, or, to collaborate or whatever it might be, use that as an example. I don't think I can be you, and I don't think you can be me. So let's just be friends and, see how we can help each other, basically.
I love that. And especially if you're upfront, you're willing to share it too. And
Yes.
you know what I would really hate, because you mentioned how the personality is really what sets it aside. And it's so true, especially even at venues, people say they book the salesperson, and the
Yes.
salesperson's such a small part of the venue, but
Right.
that's what does it. And I would hate for somebody to have a client who hated them, but they booked them because they were
Right.
cheapest. Who wants that?
Exactly.
You
No,
know?
nobody wants that. And I just had a conversation with a potential client last week, and thankfully, because not everyone is upfront, but I gave her my pricing, and she's like, wow, that's much higher than we budgeted and we're planning for. And I was like, listen, you can find people who do what I do, in quotes, because
Mhm.
no one is me, but people who offer the same service for $500, whereas I'm charging $5,000. But you know what? You get what you pay for.
Mhm.
And I try to be as upfront as possible with, my processes, with the support that you'll receive, and, all of the things that are included in my services. And it's really up to you as the client to make the decision. Is that worth it for me? Am I willing to, move around my budget a little bit to make this work? Because I feel like it's a really great fit and it's going to give me exactly what I'm looking for. Um, and thankfully, this client was like, I totally understand where you're coming from and I appreciate that. And I do see the value in, maybe spending a little bit more to have someone who is, at 150% of personality, 150% of experience and professionalism and creativity and all of those things, perhaps that is a better fit for me. So verdict's still out on if they're booking, but it was at least a really good conversation and a lesson in how to, stand up for your value.
Yes, absolutely. I really love that. And I hope it's something that people remember, because
Yes.
at the end of the day, you don't want to book someone who can't, you don't want to change your price and your value,
Right.
even
Right.
if you're really driving.
Totally. And that's why I say, have that like threshold. So maybe know in your head, like, what's the lowest that you're willing to go? And start higher
Yeah,
so that you
yeah.
can come down a little bit,
Mhm.
so that you do have that wiggle room.
Yeah. Now, how can a vendor who is not currently in a luxury or high-end market but wants to be, how
Mhm.
can they start that transition?
Sure. So I think first and foremost is sort of setting the intention for your business. Like if that's a target market for you, then you're going to want to make sure that everything about your business speaks to that market. So, you may want to consider rebranding a little bit so that, your website, your social media, things like that are speaking to the demographic that you're looking to have book you. Um, I also think that you do need to have some skill. So if you feel like you're not at the top of your game, maybe go out there and just get a little bit more experience, like we were talking about earlier, work part-time at a venue or full-time at a venue, that is within that market or for another vendor that's within that market, just so you can, gain that experience and that knowledge to have under your belt as you take on clients of your own. Um, and then I also think that it's who you associate with too. I had someone recommend to me earlier in my career about positioning myself alongside other vendors that are either at the level that I would like to be at, or maybe even a little higher than the level
Mhm.
that I'd like
Yeah.
to be at to kind of help you elevate. I had worked with a business coach that said, on your Instagram feed, the only people you should follow are the people that you want to be working with, and alongside. So that's all that you're seeing and hearing and experiencing. And hopefully that can kind of help raise your vibration almost to be, working alongside those people. And then I think it's just like selling it, like sell yourself. I think there's definitely value in just pretending that you're already there, pretend you're
Yep.
working in that market, talk
Mhm.
as though you are working in that market, and that can, help lead to opportunities to open up and, for you to see more and more incoming leads from those types of clients.
What advice do you have based on what you said? I love what you said about it's kind of like getting yourself in the room digitally. You're following
Yes.
those
Yeah.
people, you're interacting with them. So let's say you're ready to kind of really talk to them. How do you recommend
Yes.
somebody start the conversation about working together?
Sure. And do you mean in terms of like vendor to vendor?
Yes.
Yeah, so I would say, again, I'm a big proponent for just like be upfront and
Mhm.
be like, listen, I'm really trying to position myself in this market. I feel like I am a good fit for this market because fill in the blank, all of, your experiences, other, clients that you've worked with or other vendors that you've worked with. Maybe certainly compliment them on their work a little bit
Mhm.
because buttering them up can never hurt. And then I say go for it. Ask them if they'd be willing to collaborate. A big thing in the wedding industry for to create opportunities for vendors to work together, are like styled photo shoots. So if there's a set of vendors that you'd like to work with, and maybe you don't want the first time you work with them to be on an actual event, throw it out there to see if they'd be interested in organizing a styled shoot with you. That's been a huge, huge way that I have connected with vendors that I haven't worked with in the past, and have been able to begin pulling them in to recommend to my clients now going forward. I usually do somewhere between 2 and 3 styled shoots a year. And even just last year alone, like I try not to overlap the vendors that I work with either in those.
Great.
And it just vastly opens the opportunity and experience that you have with those folks. And then when you are trying to sell them to a client, you don't have to just say, oh well, I know of this person and from what I've seen they do really great work. No, you can speak from experience, and you can talk about your personal experience with that person, which I think is a huge selling point for your clients.
I love all of this. The styled shoot, I love that. Maybe we'll have you back to talk more about that process.
Yes, absolutely.
Really fun. And what I really want to enforce to everybody is what you said about just ask, because from the back end of working with venues, I see how half the vendor list is asked, or they're always working there, so they ask them, and the other half,
right,
they ask the venue, and the time
right,
is right. It's so it can be, sometimes it's that easy where they ask
exactly,
and the venue's like, we are refreshing our list, and this is going to be
exactly,
going up within the first quarter of the year. Now's a great time.
absolutely. And I should take some of my own my own advice, because I am on several vendor or venue lists specifically.
Mhm.
I have a lot of vendors that also recommend me and, refer clients to me. But I do think that venue preferred lists or venue recommended lists are huge, huge.
Mhm.
I have gotten a huge number of my leads and confirmed clients directly from venues. And I did just that. I went to them and I said, hey, I have done weddings at your venue. I really enjoy working with your team. The other thing I like to throw in there is I used to work for a venue, and I understand the threshold between what your responsibilities are and what my responsibilities are, because I know one of the things when I was working at a venue that was kind of a sticking point was planners that didn't know their boundaries.
Yeah.
So
Do not
being
put
able
glitter on the
to,
table. All right. It says right
right,
here in our
yes,
contract
or
not to.
like, don't try to dictate our dinner
Yeah.
service.
Yeah. Yeah.
You're not the caterer, you're the planner. So I think being able to highlight the ways too that you're a benefit to them, like, I won't step on your toes, like, I know how this all works, I'm here to be an extension of your team, not to steamroll your team, things like that. I think all of that is really helpful in those conversations too, if you are just going to ask, to help hit home why you're a good fit to be on their list.
Yeah. This is something we can also talk about a lot more. So I made a note to talk about this later
Yes,
too.
I love it.
Now, when a vendor is, especially if they're adjusting their pricing, but even if they're
Sure.
just from the gate, going to be more of a high end client, we spoke about how your branding should reflect that, and your
Hmm.
files and whatnot. But what else can they do to establish that that's their they're going to be a higher price point to their clients?
Sure. So I think first and foremost, be firm and be confident. If you don't sound confident when you're delivering your price point, then people are going to discount
Mm,
you immediately. They're going to be like, what's this girl talking about? Like,
yeah.
has she ever charged someone that much before? You want to say your price as though every single client that has ever booked you was told that price. Like, for sure. And this is something that I've learned in the last few years. I used to, come in and then just really, really want the sale. So I discount or
Yeah. Yeah.
adjust or whatever. No, be as firm and as confident and as consistent as you possibly can, because you need to think about the fact that if you do discount yourself, a huge amount of leads can come from referrals. If someone refers you and tells their friend, oh, I paid X amount for Allie and blah,
Mhm.
blah, blah, and she was so great, you should reach out to her. And then I tell her what my actual pricing is, and it's like wildly higher than that. That's also going to be kind of a like, that's kind of weird. Like, why is it so much higher than what the other person said? So staying as consistent as you can, I think, is important. Now, to go back to kind of what I was talking about earlier, I'm not saying that that means you can't vary your pricing a little bit, but I think that's why it's so important to have that kind of like lowest threshold of what you're willing to be paid, so that you can start at that higher amount and maybe work your way down a little bit. I think there's definitely some finesse to, being able to negotiate. But I think start high, start confident, be firm, and that will help people to, understand that you're serious, that you're a professional, and that they should be valuing, what you bring to the table in terms of your skills and expertise.
Excellent. And to kind of piggyback on what you're saying, I think when we're talking about discount, what we really mean is that it's your intentional strategy, like that it's,
Right,
you're
exactly.
not discounting your price. You kind of have an intentional strategy behind how you're
Correct.
presenting that price, because
I love that.
yeah. And something I have done to help me, because I am I kind of, like you said, I'll want to work with them, and I'm like, okay,
Right.
and then just agree to anything. And that's
Right.
why I don't mind, and this is a personal choice, but I put my starting prices on my website. I'm not
Yes.
selling weddings, I'm selling social media.
Right.
But whether that even means you have a printout that you're using, or something, a private website page that gives pricing that you only send to inquiries, something that
Right.
will kind of help you if you find that you struggle when it comes to
Definitely.
negotiating.
And that's something I recently rebranded my website, or it's in process right now. And one of the big things I was trying to decide was like, to include pricing, to not include pricing, and while my website is a great representation of me and my brand, I did obviously do the market research, and I looked at other planners I am trying to kind of be on the same level with. And I looked to see if they, were putting their pricing on their website, and they weren't. So ultimately I decided not to put my pricing directly on my website, because I would like to have a conversation with someone to kind of establish what they're looking for, what is appropriate to charge. But like you said, I do have some collateral that does have starting pricing that I share with folks after a discovery call.
Perfect. So that's great advice of how you can kind of implement that without
Yes.
putting it on your website. So that was perfect. Now, we kind of mentioned how in a luxury market, it won't necessarily, you're not always finding these kind of cut and dry packages. What are the different types of pricing that exist for vendors in a luxury market, or specifically wedding planners too?
Sure. So I would say there's a vast variety of different pricing structures, but most commonly, I think you'll either see some kind of flat rate, or some type of percentage rate. And sometimes with those percentage rates, you also have like a minimum required spend. So it could be 15% of your wedding budget, and or a minimum of $25,000. That's one of the higher end price points that I've seen. Some folks have just a flat rate, and that's is exactly what it sounds like. They know what they're spending with you. You charge an amount, and that's the amount that you're getting for the entire package. I think if you are going with a flat rate, which currently I charge a flat rate, I think if you are going to go with a flat rate pricing structure, that you ensure that you have a very specific outlined package, like certain number of meetings or hours or whatever it might be that's included with that, so that you can identify a threshold if things begin to exceed that. Because again, you're getting paid for your time. So you want to make sure that you're valuing your time appropriately. And it's so difficult to, especially with planning a wedding, it's so difficult to determine exactly what amount of time you're going to be, devoting to each project. So, I think if you do go with that flat rate option, you kind of have to do what I do, which is to assess what is your average planning time for a wedding. Make sure that whatever that flat rate is, that it is able to sustain that for you from, a cost of your time point of view. And then make sure that you include in your contract that, at this point, you will be charging additional, if you exceed X number of hours or X amount of energy spent, however you want to, quantify that and explain it to your client. But I do think it's important with the flat rate to make sure that you have that boundary set, because you want to make sure that you're getting paid for all of your time.
Mm-hmm. And since most of my background is with venues, when I heard about the percentage rate, I was like, damn.
I know, it's
Yeah.
crazy. And, it comes down to, like, I've had several people ask me why I'm not charging a percentage rate. And quite honestly, it's because I'm not confident in throwing it out there. Like I was saying before, like, be firm and confident when you talk about your pricing. Like, yes, I can explain it to someone. I just feel like the flat rate to me feels more kind of transparent and upfront. Because I think people want to know what they're going to spend. And, perhaps at that price point, budget is less of an issue. But I still think about what I would want if I was spending that kind of money and investing, that kind of dollar amount into an event. And I would want to be able to have, a pretty finite line item of what I could expect for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Do you find that customers in this market are already expecting a percentage rate, that's not a surprise to them when they see it?
Not necessarily. I'd say it's kind of 50-50. So, and a huge piece of the wedding planning industry specifically is surrounding education. Because
Mm-hmm.
I feel like a lot of couples come out here like, yeah, you might have a huge wallet, but they still have no concept of what to expect, as far as budget goes, as far as the planning process and the energy and efforts that have to go into that. So a lot of what I do is really just educating my clients on, like, what is realistic for them to expect in each of the different areas of the planning process, including my pricing.
Mm-hmm. And you had mentioned regarding the flat fee that planner needs to really think about how much time they're putting into it. And I think that's so important because regardless of what they decide, what we know is that it's going to be more than just that day. And you
Right.
really have to account for that and not
Absolutely.
undersell yourself, because that just hurts everybody.
Exactly. And I mean, this is my process, but I actually have a spreadsheet with tabs for every client, and I log every hour
Mhm.
that I spend
Wow.
on that client, so that at the end of the day, I can compare the amount of time that was put into, a specific project versus how much I charge, to make sure that it's in alignment with what my cost was, and what I wanted to make in terms of profit. So from, just like the financial business perspective, I think it's super important to do that, so that that you're covering your time and efforts that go into everything.
Yeah, that is so great. And as I mentioned, you do work with other wedding planners and
Mm-hmm.
professionals with coaching. So if you wanna find out how to make a spreadsheet like that,
Yes,
before we
call
do
me.
our rapid fire questions, can you let our audience know where they can find you and how they can work with you?
Yes, of course. So you can please find me on Instagram, which is now refreshed and beautiful, thanks to Nina. And that's just at Eventlightenment. Same for Facebook, same for Pinterest, all under at Eventlightenment. Or you can come to my website, which will be debuting a beautiful new branded format, hopefully in early February. And that's just www.eventlightenment.com. And I'm still booking limited 2023 planning dates and coaching sessions, and openly accepting 2024 for everything. So if you're interested in having a chat, please feel free to reach out.
Awesome. Definitely make sure you follow Allie, because I have a feeling she's going to become a friend of the podcast and be back
Thank
on
you.
again. So let's do some rapid fire questions for this episode, though. I like to change them up too. So, so the best types of weddings have.
A wedding planner, obviously.
You're the first one to do that, to say like
Really?
yourself. I love it.
Yes. It's a necessity, I used to say, "Oh, wedding planner is a luxury. Like if you can afford it, it's great." No, now
No,
in this
you
day
need
and age,
it.
you need
Yeah.
it.
If I could have a destination wedding, it would be at.
A private home in Europe, ideally somewhere on a body of water. Italy is super popular right now. I would take it.
Yeah, so
And
kind of
maybe
like
that's a hint for my
yeah,
hubby for a vow renewal in a few
yeah.
years.
Listen to this podcast, just the end, just the.
Yes.
So kind of Katie Holmes, Tom Cruise type of wedding.
Oh yeah, love it. Without the ending though.
Yes, and the Scientology.
Right, right.
So cocktail hour or dessert bar?
That's a really tough one, because my husband is a huge sweet tooth
Mhm.
and has rubbed off on me over the years, but I'm gonna go the opposite way and say cocktail hour because I'm a cheese fan. So a good
Mm,
cheese display during cocktail
yeah.
hour, it got me going. Or not, even better, the past little like charcuterie cones
Yes,
where
yes.
they like bring it to you, even better.
So this is going to be a side note. I know it's supposed to be rapid fire, but I find
Okay.
the charcuterie companies, because there's so many now who make them,
Oh
but they
yeah.
always come up with these like punny names. And once you see
Yes.
it, you can't unsee it. So you're going to start seeing them pop up on your feed all the time now with all these
Oh
like
yeah.
names. And it just cracks
Absolutely.
me up.
There's one local to me and it's Chelcooterie. Her
Ah,
name's Chelsea.
yeah.
I was like, you are so smart. I love this.
Yeah. Then there's like charcuterie. It's like all these like
Yeah,
different ones.
I love it.
Okay, so when I'm working, I'm listening to.
It really depends on my mood and if I'm like calmly planning or like frantic planning, because there's definitely a few different categories. But I'd say probably my top three are either Taylor Swift, Bob Marley, or St. Paul and the Broken Bones. Those are kind of like my three moods.
And are any of them more for the frantic planning or or the calm?
Yes. So I would say frantic planning is probably more Bob Marley because I'm
Mhm.
trying to calm down.
Yeah. That's funny. And the last show I binge watched was.
True Blood on HBO, for the fourth time. I
Oh,
literally just finished it last week. A huge fan. It's, if you like fantasy and vampires and like really weird concepts, I would recommend it.
fantastic. Well, this was a lot of fun, as I kind
This
of
is so
expected it
great.
would be, informative and fun. So thank you so much for sharing some of your afternoon with me. I hope to have you back
Absolutely.
on here again soon.
I would love it. Thank you so much for having me. Love chatting about all things wedding all the time. So happy to come back anytime you want.